Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be providing an update to the bull market support band. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, as of February 25th, going on February 26th, the bull market support band ranges. Not really a big range. I mean, it's essentially at 42K and ranging from 41.9K to about 42.1K. So it's more or less at $42,000. So if you're unfamiliar with the reason for talking about the bull market support band so frequently, it's because oftentimes that's where Bitcoin likes to check in with every so often. And it can be a few months, like we saw back over here, right? We checked in with it here in January when we went through it, and then we came back down to it about eight weeks later. From there, we left the 20-week SMA, 21-week EMA. We came back down to hold it as support on the weekly about 13 weeks later. We then left it right here in June, came back down to it in August about 8 weeks later, and then left it right here. And now it has been about 19 weeks. So it's been a longer time than what we historically saw, at least in 2023, since we've actually tested the bull market support band. And again, I mean, as I said, I mean, it still could certainly take some time. There are plenty of cases where it ended up going like 30 weeks or more between tests, right? I mean, here's a great example. You have to look no further than the last bull market in before the 2021 mania that occurred in altcoins. But if you look at this, you can see that it actually took about 33 weeks. Again, we're at 19 weeks right now, and that's not the only example. Here's another example in 2019, also during higher interest rates and quantitative tightening, where it really took about 25 weeks. So while it might seem like a long time, 19 weeks, it's still in the realm of historical norms, right? Like, it's not like we've never seen it. Even even at the tail end of the 2017 bull market, we went about 18 weeks and we went below it on the 20th week. So it's really not. I mean, it's really not that out of the ordinary. I mean, I know people tell me that this time is different because of the ETFs, and I'm not suggesting that the ETFs have had no effect, but we have seen Bitcoin go, frankly, for another. I mean, even from this point, if you were to go out and how long it took it to retest it in 2021, to go out to the 33 weeks, I mean, that would put it all the way out in June, right? Just to give you an idea of how long that took. In 2019, it took 25 weeks, and I mean, 25 weeks would essentially put you in April. So, I mean, the beginning of April, I believe. Yeah, the week of April 8th. So maybe about, beginning to mid-April. But it is within the realm of what we have seen. We've also noted before the pattern that we've seen here with a lot of these moves higher by Bitcoin, and that is essentially, if I can find that path, essentially, you move up, you consolidate, you get a slightly higher high, and you move down, right? We've seen that happen a lot. Move up, consolidate, get a slightly higher high, and move down. Here, up, consolidate, slightly higher up, and then back down. And so here we even did it over here, right? We moved up, consolidate, slightly higher high, back down, up, and now, we're at least in a consolidation phase, right? It remains to be seen if it will repeat the same pattern as the other ones, but I'm just referencing it because this pattern continues to repeat itself over and over and over again. And it's one of the reasons why, we talked about this 20% drop being in line with these 20% drops. And to sort of recognize that that's all we've gotten so far, and that at least in sort of the 2019 rally, once you had this drop, right, 30 to 40% drop, that occurred right before rate cuts arrived. And I mean, I know a lot of people don't really care about the macro stuff and rate cuts, and so I try to do decent job of balancing out crypto content, which is what I know most people want, with a little bit of the macro. I know you guys really want altcoin stuff, but there's other channels. And so yeah, I mean, like that didn't occur. This larger drop didn't occur until rate cuts were only 1 month away. Now the counterpoint to that is to say that it's not the rate cut that leads to the drawdown. It's the drawdown that leads to the rate cut, right? So right now, rate cuts are not being priced, and they're being priced out and to not start until June, I think, right? So several months away, and that certainly could be the case. I mean, I'm not doubting it. I think with the information that we have now and how sticky that inflation has been, I mean, maybe they do wait until June. I don't know. But I mean, we also have to recognize that it's not like that the Fed would, normally the Fed's cutting for a reason, right? So it's the drop that causes the cut, not usually the other way around, or it's the weakness, that implied weakness that causes the cut, not the cut that causes the weakness. So, and one of the interesting things, I was actually looking at this, and maybe I'll do another video, on it, but looking at interest rates and overlaying them, what do you notice? It's actually really similar here. After we hit the terminal rate, a very similar pattern that we saw, actually. And I wanted to highlight this in case I haven't mentioned it before. I don't know if I mentioned it before or not, but what you'll notice, if you ignore what came before it, right? This was a move up into it. This was a move down into it, right? But if you ignore what came before it, just what happened after the Fed paused? What happened after the Fed paused, right? And what you'll see is after the pause, Bitcoin went down. And then after a brief dip, it slowly went back up to where that dip started from. And then once it reached that level, it exploded higher, right? It went up, it went up a little bit and consolidated, and then went up a lot more. And so here you can see that it ultimately topped out, right, as the cuts arrived. And so it's interesting because we've seen a very similar thing, right? On the pause, Bitcoin dips down, consolidates, but slowly builds back up to where it dropped down from. Once it broke that, it then skyrocketed higher, right? Consolidated, still moving up. And so, that's why I talk about the Fed and monetary policy, because, we have to be aware of that potential outcome. But again, that potential outcome could still be months away. It certainly could be. And in line with the sort of the Bitcoin dominance views, I got to get it in there, right? But in line with the idea of the Bitcoin dominance views, if Bitcoin, the idea, the thesis about the dominance, which, is down right now, but the thesis is that it goes up no matter what, no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. And so, just briefly, if you had a Bitcoin rally, like if it continued to rally like it did over here before rate cuts arrived, then I imagine dominance would go up, right? If it dropped, I think dominance would also go up. So I think this is important to watch, and note that as we relate it to, say, the bull market support band, you can see that Bitcoin finally tested the bull market support band after rate cuts arrived, which is interesting to think about, right? It tested it after the first rate cut. And we know the first rate cut right now is being priced to occur in June. That could be shifted to May. It could also be shifted out to July, but potentially in June. And remember, over here, after the pause by the Fed, we got this drop down. But just to pull that, just to show it here, from the pause right there until Bitcoin fell below the 20-week SMA at the cut, it was 40 weeks. 40 weeks. So here from the pause, right, it was actually above the 20-week SMA. And if we just sort of go out to the current day, it's 30 weeks, right? 40 weeks puts you out in May, which potentially we get a rate cut in May, potentially in June. Probably not going to happen in March. I think entering the year, People were hopeful that we might get a rate cut in March. Likely not going to happen. and we'll see if one comes in May. But you can see that when Bitcoin did test the bull market support band finally after the Fed pause, it was actually after the Fed started cutting that Bitcoin finally fell back below it. So that I think is something to sort of keep in mind. So if Bitcoin were to push higher into say the mid 50s or the upper 50s or even the 60s, if it were to go up there, I have to imagine the Bitcoin dominance would go up with it, and eventually I imagine all Bitcoin pairs would struggle to keep up, right? It's interesting because if you overlay a lot of these alt Bitcoin stuff, you can see that a lot of them have bled over the last few months. I know ETH Bitcoin is up right now, but they just were not able to keep pace with Bitcoin, right? Throughout this entire move, they were not able to keep pace with Bitcoin, and they haven't been keeping pace with it in this move, at least collectively. So that'll be something that is worthwhile to continue to follow as well. So I think that in terms of where we are right now, it's been about 18 weeks since we tested the bull market support band, right? It's been about 18 weeks. History shows that's not that out of the ordinary, right? 2019, 2021, 2017. All periods where Bitcoin went 18 weeks or more, which is basically, we're at around that 18-week mark right now. So we've seen it before. People tell me this time is different, but we've seen it before. It'll likely eventually check back in with it. Still potentially in the window, sort of the safe window, but we are certainly pushing that threshold. And one of the things I said over here was that if we don't test it here, that could have consequences many months later, right? Typically, when you get a move like that, where it comes close but doesn't actually test it, right? Like right here, you can see we came down, didn't actually test it. That a lot of times when that happens, it kicks the can down the road for a few months, right? Just like that, right? Came back down, didn't actually retest it, right? Just like here, right? You can see these examples where you get pullbacks, but you're not testing the bull market support band. And so basically what happens is it leaves the people that were wanting to buy here chasing, right? It leaves them chasing, which is why during this pullback, I was very vocal about, hey, look, it's been 20 to 21% already. It might not go any more than that in the short term. I do expect it to eventually get a deeper retrace. But again, by the time that happens, it could be on the other side of rate cuts, right? And by that time, the narrative will certainly shift away from the halving and the whole spot ETF, and it'll shift to, has the Fed gone too far, or can they achieve a soft landing, right? I think that's what it'll ultimately shift to. But in the meantime, the markets have obviously been focused on other things, right? I mean, because the inflation, while it hasn't gone down, it still really hasn't reaccelerated. It's just been flat at around 3% for the last half year. And while the labor market has loosened up in some areas and like in hiring and quits and whatnot, it hasn't really seen that in the unemployment rate, which is the thing that actually matters, right? There's still been a lot of excess. So that's where we are with Bitcoin and the bull market support band, and hopefully that's useful. Still kind of in this same window of up, consolidate, right? Up, consolidate, same thing, right? Over and over and over again. And now it's just repeating again. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.